This was a show that really broke through for HBO in the terms of getting HBO recognized.
Larry Sanders Show convinced us, yeah, we can. If we do it differently, if we do it in a way that has a voice.
Celebrity is an American illness. And this was a show that lanced the boil.
Every single human being connected to show business was watching that show every single week.
But everybody in every work situation said, this show speaks to us.
It became the coolest thing in the world to be affiliated with the Larry Sanders Show.
It really showed the shades of gray of the human persona and the dark side of the psyche in ways that other situation comedies wouldn't even come close to touching.
When I saw Larry Sanders, I was blown away. I thought that's how good television can be.
Instinctually, I knew walking on the set, like, oh, like this is for real.
It was unlike anything that I'd ever seen on television.
Larry Sanders in many ways showed the future, you know, the that air of improvisation, the hyper reality, the use of film.
So from there comes Soprano, Sex and the City, Deadwood, Curb Your Enthusiasm, and all that came after.
I was writing for Sanford & Son and some other television shows when I was like 24, 25 years old, and I got bored very quickly. And I went to the Comedy Store one night and got up on amateur night.
I mean, you don't know what it was like being an unwanted child. My mother had tried to talk her doctor into performing an abortion, but he said he wouldn't do it because it was illegal to perform an abortion once the child had reached the age of 15.
And I walked off that stage and I thought, my God, this could be a way I could find out who I am, because I'm so self-conscious up there that clearly I'm scared to death of being whoever I am. And that began the search. And I think that process continues.
He came on the show, did his stand-up, and was remarkable. I mean, the audience went wild. Johnny said, this is great. I asked him if he wanted to guest host the show, and he did. And again, it was different from anyone else, more imaginative, fresher. And we booked him back many times as a guest host, and he did it on a regular basis. And then he got It's Gary Shandling's Show, and as we all know, Gary, when he gets involved in a project, really gets involved. And he said, I can't do the guest hosting anymore.
I got the idea for the Larry Sanders Show from my first show, It's Gary Shandling's Show. We did an episode where of that series where I went on a talk show. It was like a local LA talk show. It was Christina Ferrari, and I remember doing that episode, and I remember walking off going, boy, there's a show about, from the other side, about the people who host the show. But really, then I had to decide if that was a show that was going to allow me to explore human interaction and not just be some show about show business.
We know that Americans watch a tremendous amount of television. The amount of that percentage that is talk show watching is inordinately high. I knew that the Carson retirement was coming. I knew talk shows would be in the news. So I said, okay, this may be behind the scenes of a subject matter, but it's a subject matter that a hell of a lot of Americans know about. So when Gary called me to pitch this, it had actually been something we were thinking about. But as I've always said in this business, ideas are easier. Execution is what's most important. And in our first conversation, Gary and I was sort of finishing each other's sentences in terms of the mood and tone.
Michael offered Gary, I think it was a 13-episode commitment, which was unheard of because here we were in programming saying to ourselves, well, do we even have the money? Should we spend the money? What should we develop? We're developing things. And here Michael basically had given away all of our money on over lunch.
They'd gotten the 13 episodes and no pilot, and I had just assumed that Gary had blown someone. So, I mean, that's the typical.
We're talking about the reality of network TV. This is how, if you really want to strip it down, this is what's going on. And these guys, you're seeing them behind the scenes, you're seeing them how they pander to the network executives, how they scheme and just slide away. Because you
It had everything in it. It was. I thought it was just clear from the start that this thing stood out.
Well, Rip Torn was hilarious in Defending Your Life, and Dennis Klein was adamant that he was the guy, but I'd never met Rip. And so he came in for a meeting, and he just sat like this the whole time. He had a fishing hat on. And he didn't want to read, and he would just look up. And I would try talking to him. I'd say, well, Rip, did you like the script? Yeah, I liked the script. And he wouldn't read. And so he would not read until I called him back a few weeks later because I was stumped.
I had been warned by one of my agents who said, don't read. You don't have to read. So Gary said, do you want to read? I says, no. And the next second was the greatest second in my life because instantly I said, do you want to read? I says, no, but I will. And so we improvised for about an hour and a half. People would come in and then we started playing the characters like at a discussion about a show, and people would come in, he'd take phone calls, I would stay in character, he'd stay in character, and we just had a lot of fun.
The character of Artie was mostly based on Fred de Cordova, who was, Fred and I executive produced the show together. And Fred is the flamboyant character in real life.
Many of the attributes of de Cordova, since I don't know him, I attribute to him based on stories and things like that. And I think one of them is, as a good producer, he protects his star. He protects his star above all things. He will coddle these people who come on the show, but if any of them turns against Larry, that's trouble. Rip is such a force of personality. You know, there's such strength to him.
I mean, the sting fades after a while. You can't do that while I'm shooting.
Let's do it again.
I'd like to start
my eye goes right to movement. You know that. It's because I shoot skeet and birds.
Okay, I like to go to the top anyway, so let's just be very still. If you can do me a favor, if you can run this up your shirt.
Jesus. Why can't we put it on the outside?
Well, because it doesn't look good when they've got the cable going down.
Really?
No, it looks unprofessional to me.
Well, let's do it. I like unprofessional. Are you so bothered that you want to kill yourself? Because I'm a get-along guy.
I would rather it.
What?
Why? Yeah. Because it looks. Yeah.
Just that no. But this is our show. This has more to do with.
If this scene makes it, then that's cool.
And this is actually right here.
Yeah.
Right this moment.
Yep.
This is what this guy taught me.
One camera film is all my only thing to let you know that this isn't in front of a live audience.
Oh, good.
Yeah, we were down to, we couldn't find anybody. This was like, we were really close. Jeffrey was the last person we saw.
I can't believe you ever said, hey now as a kid, did you?
No, probably didn't. Well, I said hey.
Uh-huh.
You know, and I guess I said now. Different times, but.
Yeah, Dennis Klein came up with Hey Now, which is so brilliantly simple.
All I'm saying is...
He's inventing in an audition, and, you know, it's still inspiring to see someone that courageous. He's really courageous.
Oh, hey now!
After this audition, Jeffrey Tambor called me at the gym, and he said, I really know that guy. I really know that guy. He did.
He took an enormous time in casting, forever. I couldn't get him to hire me. I kept saying, well, I got this offer, I did, too. And he said, well, you got to do what you got to do. He just would not be rushed. Thank God. I mean, because look what we assembled.
I had not acted prior to this, really. The first really acting I had done was some of the stuff for the Ben Stiller show. So by default, I wound up being sort of a naturalistic actor the way he likes, only because I had no idea what I was doing.
When I did this work, I said, okay, now, we're not talking about being funny now, which is what everyone had to get over, because everyone came in going, it's a comedy, right? And even when I was auditioning people, they would come in and start to read like, okay, well, this is a comedy, and I'd have to say, whoa, 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 whoa. I got to see if people can get to their core first. Then we'll talk about the comedy. I was just looking for people who brought power, and I'm really proud of every one of those people. And those people who I sensed had their power and yet didn't know how to bring it and didn't understand, because I needed support in bringing my power, so I'm able to look at a person like when Sarah Silverman or Marilyn Rice Cobb started the show, and to give them that gift to say, no, don't worry. You have nothing to prove here. Your power comes from being yourself.
I mean, you get on the set and Gary comes up to you and says, whatever your lines are, just, I don't care what you say, just get the idea across. I mean, if you say pineapple, you can say pineapple. I mean, he trusted everybody with communicating the story in their own words. And I think that really, that's a big thing of what made the show great, and it was fun.
Touche. Just standing right there, we see one boom crossing the frame, and Peter Smokey, you're in the image.
We had great directors. A plethora of them were directed by Todd Holland, and he had a grasp of this show, and there was great trust, and he had a great knowledge of what an actor goes through.
I'd never done anything like Larry Sanders at all, and not 3 cameras and 4-wall sets. I mean, I don't come from sitcoms. I come from single camera, a single camera background. And what we were doing was very much a hybrid sitcom, kind of style, but with none of the infrastructure or training that comes with a sitcom.
So we had to shoot the entire show in 2 days. And in order to accomplish that, you had to use 3 cameras to get all of the necessary shots.
And we had no money for Steadicam, nothing. It was the cheapest show on television. And Peter would rollerblade, and he was very adept.
Our master camera was usually me on rollerblades, which I've brought here. Someone asked me to bring these. Rollerblade.
Action!
Staggering. You were funny with every guest.
That old guy fucked us. My grandmother's funnier than that.
Well, she's booked for next Thursday.
It got to the point where the dolly grip could actually pull him, and Peter would adjust his feet, and so that he could actually reverse and be pushed. He could actually do all the moves, and you could push and pull like Peter with the rollerblades, and it's hilarious. When actors have too much time, when you do the clapper and quiet on the set and rolling and clapper, there's a stagnancy that comes in, and they're all in their heads, and they're doing nothing but thinking about their work, And then what also happens is it takes forever once you say cut to get to the next time you can roll and do the clapper and get the set quiet and roll sound and all that crap. Both things made me crazy. And I just literally had them, I started screaming, we're not cutting, we're going back to one. Back to one, we're not cutting. Back to one. I'm sorry.
There wasn't much time to think. You just had to do it, that's the secret to everything. Don't think. Just do it. Dive in. Jump off the cliffs. Yeah. Get wet.
And everything's been set into place, all the building blocks. And just now Todd yells, back to one. And before you know it, you've integrated it all, and something comes out. And that's how I work.
Gary was in charge of the writing. He was the person who said, this is the draft that's going to the table. And so he and I would sit together and go through scripts, and ultimately, and that would take hours and hours. We'd do it at his house.
I was doing Murphy Brown.
Right.
And Fred Barron brought me in.
Pete came in a briefcase, not in a briefcase, with a briefcase.
Yeah.
With some other writer that came in a briefcase.
Yeah.
That's a really conservative guy.
He didn't work out, as I remember.
Well, we couldn't get the combination to the case.
I was going to say, he wouldn't leave the case. Yeah, I said to you today that I'm wearing pretty much the same thing. A blue blazer,
so he came
and
in
I had a briefcase.
And a briefcase.
I looked like the show's accountant.
Yeah, and I thought, this guy cannot in any way.
No way.
And I had an idea, and I told him what the idea of an episode was, and I don't know, he just got that it was edgy and different, and he was able to do it right off the bat, more or less.
It's a rare thing for a writer when you have an epiphany where you go, wow, I know how to write this. I know these characters. I can just sit down and it'll come out of me. And I did. I just sat down. I wrote whatever episode I had to write. I think it was the Garden Weasel episode. And it was just, I just knew the tone of that show. I hooked in with Gary. I fully understood what his sensibility was, what he wanted to say, how he wanted to say it. And it just came out. That rarely happens. And as I got to know him, I realized, first of all, incredibly smart, obviously very funny, but really smart, and knew how to tell a story, knew how to write a script, knew how to edit a script. That comes from a lot of experience when he was a writer.
You know, before season started, Gary would start having people come over to the house and we would all kick around story ideas.
All the writers would bring their story ideas, and they were sort of one or two liners, and they would come and pitch to Gary and the whole group. But it was up to Gary. It was a sort of intuitive thing, the ideas that struck him as interesting.
And slowly, hopefully, a very rough idea of what the main arc of the season would be comes to the surface.
And then you would write an outline for the story, and then Gary would say, the story doesn't start soon enough. And then you'd write another outline, and Gary would say, the story doesn't start soon enough. I was just always remembered, the story just doesn't start early enough. So finally, when you got the story starting on page 1, or maybe page 2 at the latest, that you would be okay to go forward with it.
I would just try to get Gary to do as much as he could. I mean, I tried to get Gary to rewrite as much of the script. You know, it used to be Gary would leave and we'd rewrite the script. I was like, well, Gary, it kind of would be easier for me to sit alone with you for 2-3 hours and we'll work on it together, which was code for you'll rewrite it.
She's a metaphor for the pressure that we have in life. Larry wouldn't have a conflict if he was the boss. Not that this would have changed anything, but I remember people saying, well, I mean, he's this big, successful talk show host, so what's the struggle?
Yeah. What's so wrong with his life?
Yeah. What are people gonna? Well, this is what happens in everybody's job. He's struggling. That's what this reveals. Is that all these people in show business are human beings?
That's a line that people still say to me. They still say to me, "Yeah, I killed a guy like you in Korea."
Especially Rip now.
I love to write for Rip. Yeah. I love to write Artie and Hank. Yeah. Not so much you. You know why?
No, I don't. But I'm happy to find out after all this time.
I didn't think I could write you better than you could.
Was that true? I think that you did a great job writing Larry. We may have adjusted and stuff.
You were much more. You'd take a script and go, well, I don't think I need to say that, and I can do that with just the look, and I can do so. You'd really pare it down to the. It was really great.
I think I like doing fewer words than anybody probably. While people were trying to, would like to say more, I'd like to say less and do it in that space right there, that empty space. My script, I wish I had the script here. We'll get it later. We'll pull out one of my old scripts. It's just loaded with acting notes for Larry. I guest hosted The Tonight Show. I did it a week at a time. After that week, I would go, my God, I could not do this. First of all, the pressure. Second of all, I think being on TV every night, which changes you.
But, you know, Gary has a very specific process, and he kind of tortures himself. I always look at him and say, it should be easier for him. It should be easier. He's so gifted.
You cannot be in your head as a writer and then behave as an actor. So that also requires great physical energy and emotional internal energy to clear out all of your head from where you've been writing from and now actually feel.
There was nothing better than when he was like really into what was, I mean, he was always super invested, but that moment where you're like working with him on like a line or something, it's just like very exciting because he is so committed to what he's doing.
I think Gary honestly has a love-hate relationship with acting, and he sort of dreads it. He dreads that he'll be awful at it, and he'll look silly, and so he's a lot of fear surrounding it. But he's also wants to take the journey. He wants to go on the journey and learn and grow. And he has acting coaches and a lot of really talented people who have helped him and guided him.
So I would call Roy up and I would say, "Hey, Roy, I got an offer to host a talk show. You think there's any way I can grow in that?" But we both thought that doing it night after night after night after night would not lead to the exact kind of growth that a show might that had more serious circumstances. So as I began to think of my first series, It's Garry Shandling Show, I remember saying to Roy, well, I'm not going to be able to come to class because I've got this show. Can you come to the show and teach me every week? And as that show became slimmer, emotionally, meaning it lost its realness and became kind of a cartoon and a sketch show, even though it was really funny. I knew I had to stop that show because I didn't feel anything anymore. That's when the Larry Sanders Show I had the idea, and I called Roy up and I said, can I discover more who am I in a show like this? And he said, if you commit, and if the writing is true, and you have to go places and feel things that you would be afraid of, or other people seeing. I turned to those guys when I was having an acting problem. I'd go right to Rip or to Jeffrey and go, I don't know how to play this scene. I will see you tomorrow night. No flipping. I don't think I'm not sure if I know how to do this.
That was good.
Huh?
That was exactly right.
That's right?
Yeah. He's exactly right.
Okay.
It's vulnerability. It's exposing yourself. And I think that's easier for him today than it was then. I mean, acting is risky business. I mean, you put yourself out there, you expose some truth about yourself, and Gary's obsession is to truly expose the truth about himself.
So by having Larry one step removed from me, it allows me to explore the sides of me that get angry and the sides of me that feel stupid or need people to like me. You know, I could let Larry show all those things.
I would say honestly, Larry is a heightened version of Gary. They are, in many ways, the same person. They really are. I mean, Gary just brought a lot of his personality to that character. Larry is obsessed with some of the same things that Gary is, to a more comic extent. But even at that comic extent, you go, God, he really is that person. So there, again, a fine line between who those two people were.
I don't think that Larry Sanders is capable of creating the Larry Sanders Show. You know what I mean? I mean, obviously, this is Gary's conception, this show, and it's this character that he can play really well, but it's this whole world around him, you know. And so, I mean, Gary is he has got a lot more sides to him, I think, than Larry Sanders.
The talk show stuff is such second nature to me. I would do it like a talk show. I had so much experience that I could just make that feel real.
It was frighteningly real. It was so accurate, I cannot tell you.
Talk show nights came once every 3 weeks, and we'd carry the script material from the first 2 episodes into the 3rd week, and we had this little Bible of all the pieces we're carrying that we need to shoot with a live audience. Gary really loved to have a live audience for his stand-up. It was, it's impossible to do stand-up when you're not getting a reaction.
And the audience would always play along. So you could say to the audience, and I would talk to the audience and do the warm-ups and talk to the audience and say, okay, we're doing a talk show part that fits into a story, and I would tell them, and I'd say, so now you've come tonight, and you're just watching the talk show, and I'll come out and I'll do a monologue, and then I'm gonna interview Billy Crystal or whomever. And you realize how fast an audience can really adjust, and they just started to act like a talk show audience. I mean, it felt like a talk show in there on Wednesday night.
In the beginning, one of the exciting things about the show was that we were going to be able to work with real live, semi-human Hollywood celebrities. So that was, really exciting. The issue became how to get them on the show, because, initially nobody knew what the show was. The first break that we had actually was Gary knew Carol Burnett. I had worked with her too, and we were able to go to her and say, would you please come on the show and do this thing? And by virtue of Carol being there, the door opened, people said, hey, I see what this is. And then we had no problem, for the most part, getting celebrities.
That curtain is a perfect metaphor for how we as human beings behave when we're out in front of people and want to be seen and liked in a certain and perceived in a certain way. Everybody, once they're out of their house. Celebrity and a talk show kind of thing just exaggerates that. And then once they're back behind the curtain, back in their own house, what really goes on and what are the problems? In most regular sitcoms, you're playing the subtext. The words are the subtext. Hey, I missed you. Where were you today? Because I was waiting for whatever. Whereas, what really happens in life is all this stuff that's going on underneath, and all the stuff that comes out of your mouth to cover that.
So I think what Roy London did for Gary as an actor, that influenced Gary's writing, and what Gary was trying to achieve with his writing, which was to get to the core of people and what their desires and needs were without openly expressing any of this.
Because people don't say what they're thinking. You got to let them behave and see what they say out of that behavior to cover what they're feeling. They just can't say, I'm feeling sad today. I want to see the person that we know is sad walk in and go, how are you today?
Larry Sanders taught me that it's flawed human behavior is 10 times more interesting than correct human behavior.
Characters who are behaving as they would in real life. They're not performing. We're not writing jokes for characters. We're showing characters who are, under pressure to do a show, misbehaving, behaving badly. So it's, it was a lot of fun. I responded to all of those things. But what we did do was steal from our actors, because we would learn things about them as time went on. And we said, hey, that's an interesting thing. Sometimes a story, but sometimes just a personal attribute. Penny was religious and would, come up to us very, very respectfully and say, I can't say the Lord's name and fucking pussy in the same sentence. So if you can move the Lord's name to another speech, and then I can just say fucking pussy by itself, that'd be great.
But a lot of misbehavior by actors, it became scripted behavior.
If Jeffrey Tambor was being cocky or arrogant or had an attitude and it felt like Hank-like, does Jeffrey know he's acting like Hank right now? And sometimes you couldn't tell because everyone's so method, you don't know if they're just kind of in the head of this attitude. You would definitely put it in the show.
Well, once he helped me on a very important turn for Hank. I was being less than nice to somebody. I'm usually a pretty nice guy, but I guess I don't know, it's kind of like...
Someone who had the nerve to speak to you.
Yeah, because I won't allow that. And because he shouldn't. Or maybe he was looking me in the eyes, which
it was something, it was that thing, you could hear them taking a step.
Yes. And you said, why don't you add that to him? Why don't you add that pettiness?
Well, you used to ask me about certain things that you admitted were character flaws, and you said, should I put them in, Hank? I says, why not?
It's like taking a temple, a Buddhist temple bell, an authentic 2,000-year-old Buddhist temple bell, and ringing it and going, well, why does that, can you tell me why that rings so purely? Well, because it's the real thing.
Gary would just say, be truthful. In any situation, Gary would say, well, what would you really say? What would you do if that happened? And that was always the answer in any situation. If you really thought about the character, it might be something stupid or ridiculous or funny. But what would that character do?
And that was another virtue of this show, was that you had to be on your toes. You had to, and Gary would come down. He would be on the set. Or the writer of record of that script would be on the set, and we would change on the moment. Not improv, but he would change.
I just don't think that there should be a stark difference between what's off camera and what's on camera. It isn't suddenly like, okay, now you start the scene, now you start being human. I knew from the very beginning that the magic happened in the mistakes. It's something that I've heard Roy say. It's something I felt.
And I don't know if it actually was a credo, but it seemed to be one of the components is leave the mistakes in. If you trip or you falter, leave that in. And also, not slavishly rehearsing, and then recreating that rehearsal, but actually peaking your performance at the time you're filming it.
Roy used to say, the magic is not only in the mistakes, but in fact, if you could capture that actor or those actors in that scene, that is still, in this present moment, strangely, my connection to Jerry Seinfeld is I would bump into him on the lot, and he understood the impossibility of being in a show and writing a show.
Leonard Cohen has this lyric that is, everything cracks, that's how the light gets in. I don't have any doubt that the pressure of that show, and ever more with no support, had benefit for the show. I don't think it can, and have benefit in the big cosmic picture for everybody, but I don't think it can be good for the person who's, who's responsible to put the thing out and who cares about quality.
Well, I thought the show was probably creatively at its peak. I mean, I was never one to drag stuff on, as many women will tell you.
And the Larry Sanders Show was over when Gary said, "This is the last season." And I don't think there was a finer thing I've ever seen on television than the final episode. And he thought about it for a really long time, and it was a beautiful, perfect ending to an amazing experience for all of us.
I called you and said, I have an idea for the last episode, which is mostly talk show.
All right.
And we talked for a very short time, and you wrote a first draft of the last episode that it was the funniest table reading we ever had for that last episode.
Which we won the Emmy for.
Which we won the Emmy for.
No, there was a lot of work that went into it, because you remember there was also some fortuitous stuff in there, because Judd Apatow was working on the show at the time, and Judd got Jim Carrey to do that part.
That's right.
And I talked Jim Carrey into doing the last episode. Well, that I'm going to take. I talked him into it. I asked him for 5 years, and then finally I was able to call him and say, there's only one left. This is your last shot. And then Jim said, I will do the last episode if I can be the best person who's ever done any episode.
Flip was a very difficult episode. It was emotional, and it was many things. Gary had a monologue. He did the last monologue, and it was a big deal for him. But from the minute he shot that monologue, it was so like cathartic or something that he didn't want to be there from that point on.
The most important thing for me, other than that, was to say goodbye to the characters that we had created and that we had loved so much. I say to Gary, and I probably said it before, that I wrote the first draft of that episode after Gary and I had talked, and a lot of those conversations happened over the course of the entire season, where he'd say, hey, in the last episode we should, and I would write it down. So when I sat down to write it, it was 6 months of information that I was able to channel. But I took a Post-it note. I've never done this. It's such a goofy thing. But I put the word love on it. For this show, of all things, to put the word love on it. And I stuck it on the computer because I wanted to remember as I wrote it how much I loved the characters and how I wanted to send them off in a good way. And I said to Gary, I said, I know how this ends. I know exactly how this episode ends. And I'm not going to tell you, but I know the last scene of this show, and it's the three of you, because that's the core of it.
The last episode and the last scene to be shot of the last episode was a metaphor for the entire series, which was, it was something like 1 o'clock in the morning, and we'd been shooting since 7 o'clock. And even though this was the last shot of the entire series, you're still going, oh, you've got to be kidding me. We've still got to do that scene. You've got to be kidding me.
Gary, I don't know why he said it. He says, I don't know if we should do it. I remember saying, you don't think we should do it? This is what the 6 years was all about. I mean, this is it. This is the whole deal. And I got mad at him, which was the second time I got mad at him. And I just said, don't make up, use it. And that's when I chased him up the thing. We did it in one take. The cameras, I remember, and the actors were moving as one. It was just one of those times when you go, you can't do, you knew that you had to do the 10th take on the first take. And you just took your, and you made it. You just made it work. And I tell people about that, and I say, if anything typifies that show, it was that.
It was such a thrill to see that everybody, especially Jeffries' great aria that he had there at the end. Mm-hmm. And Gary and I did pretty good too.
And there was all the honesty of missing each other when I talked to him in the scene. It was what it was. And all of this frustration that I was feeling is in that scene when I walk up and I go.
And then the real love between Artie and Larry, even though Artie sees Larry as a huge pain in the ass who requires so much care and coddling and feeding, he still loves him and he's going to miss him. And I try to channel all of those feelings into the writing of it.
Remembering how much fun we had, and how creative it was. I'm profoundly sad because at least I've been trying to talk him into, I said, I want to do like Peter Falk does, do one a year or something like that. And I've been hammering that thing. But you know, maybe once a time is over, you got to let it go.
I knew it was special. I knew that those, just the vagaries of this business, they don't come along that often. And I knew that it was going to be less than for a long while. I was sad to see it go.
And that's why I think there was a lot of love on that set, because that actually allows for real human connection. And that's love.
Winning and losing is not important. Being nominated
Gary, we won.
Oh, we won. Oh, thank God.
Okay, yeah.
Oh, being nominated means nothing.
The show became so appreciated by the people that write about television, and then by extension people that write about the cultural life of our country. It became a show that, you know, if you haven't seen the show, you have to see it.
You know, when a show is great, then there's all these other shows that try to be like that show, but all these people that tried to steal that idea, they were stealing the wrong thing. Like, they were stealing the concept of a behind-the-scenes kind of show or something like that. That's not what made the show great. The show was great because of the process. They should all have stolen the process of it.
I have fallen to a lifelong love with the living moment, and it's something I learned there, and something I won't direct comedy or drama without a moment that is genuinely fresh and alive and spontaneous and feels human.
I take that experience into everything I've ever done, and most importantly, I try to take the integrity Gary has to do something great and to create something that is human and connected and artful.
It was a great learning experience, one that has enhanced my life and my career. It changed my life.